We are in the final countdown to Shavuos, in the lead up. Couple more days, almost Shabbos, almost Yantif. The Jewish people had arrived at the mountain. They were there, they were waiting, they were getting ready. We're here at the foot of the mountain, almost Shavuos. We've been counting 7 weeks. We're about to go into a completely new dimension where we will, as Hashem, be able to receive something brand new, like newborn babies, a whole new Torah revealing itself to us that will dynamically unfold during the year to come. Very powerful, very lofty, in the realm of the 50th day, in the realm of total freedom, so pure. And on that day of Shavuos coming up, we read the book of Ruth, the book of Rus. And this is really interesting. Who would have thought that our sages would have chosen a Megillah, a story all about a convert, all about a woman, all about a difficult time period in Jewish history, really enigmatic. Why was the book of Rus chosen to be read on Shavuos? So before I go on, this shir is for a refuah shalema, for a member of our community here in Johannesburg, Sarah Elishava Bas Rachel Guta. She should have a refuah shalema. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to be speaking about our theme, as always, about the theme, the power of woman to bring the redemption. This is the place to look. The book of Ruth, Megillas Rus. This is where we're going to find our answers. So we were in the middle of asking, why do we read this book, this Megillah, this sefer on Shavuos? So I have here a printout that I printed out many years ago from Yalkut Me'am Lois, and it brings 20 different reasons why, 20 different reasons why the book of Rus is read on Shavuos, and we could have a whole share just going through this. It's fascinating and beautiful, but for our purposes tonight, I'm going to just focus on the 12th reason. So the 12th reason, Bas Mitzvah, Kadei lelamdenu sheshavos hanashim hatzidkanios letzadikim, to teach us that righteous women are equal in stature to righteous men. Why do we need a source to teach us this? Because this is the inner truth of the Torah, right? This is the pnimi. Just like women are inner and sanua and pnimi, in the inner core, the unseen, invisible, powerful core, so too is the Torah regarding the feminine, the inner, unseen, powerful inner core. Even though halachically you can say that women aren't obligated in the study of Torah, women can reach the same exalted level, just like Rus, that became the mother of royalty. She literally rose into her crown, literally. So I want to speak about what are the 3 keys to redemption. So I want to talk a little bit, trace the theme of Geula, of redemption through the sefer, and then I want to speak about the 3 keys. I'm going to be zooming through a little bit because what I really want to do, as crazy as this sounds, and I don't know if we're going to manage, what I want to do is actually go through the Megillah. It's a short Megillah, 4 prakim. Don't know if we're going to manage, but we can certainly try. We can certainly start. So let's first talk about redemption. So where do we see the theme of Geula in the book of Rus? I'm thinking of my second son, who is, Baruch Hashem, he just turned 15. And his name is Rafal David. And I know he just turned 15 because he just had a birthday. And his bris, when he was born, 8 days after he was born, was on Shavuos, on Shabbos, on Shavuos. And because of that, we named him, his second name, David. And Rus is the inner essence of David HaMelech, says Rav Pinkus. The inner essence of the Malchus, of kingship, of Malchut, which is the feminine midah, which we always refer to mystically. But if you're just coming in over here and on the very basic, simple level, This is the story written by Shmuel the Navi, legitimizing the great-grandmother of King David, Ruth. And the reason why this was important is because the Torah says, Lo yavo Amoni u'Moavi b'kal Hashem, that there shouldn't enter into the congregation of Israel somebody from Ammon and Moab, meaning should not marry into the Jewish people. So if this case wasn't put to rest, the naysayers, the scoffers, the Rashan would always taunt King David and find fault in the lineage of the kingship and ultimately Mashiach, who derived from Rus, who came from Moab, who was a convert from Moab. So the halacha was in a state of flux. The oral, the rabbinic tradition, the rabbanim that weigh into using their systems of determining the halacha, how should it be applied, it was in a state of flux. The written Torah said nobody from Moab can marry into the Jewish people. Ruth herself didn't think she would be able to marry when she accompanied Naomi back to the land of Israel. So when she agreed, when she said to her mother-in-law Naomi, I will go with you, I will never part from you, your people are my people, where you go, I will go, that whole speech that she said, she in her mind thought that she will never be able to get married. That was the extent of her self-sacrifice. And what had emerged in the halachic process, in the Beis Din, and with the sages of the time, was they had unearthed the details of the halacha, which permitted women to enter into the Jewish people, but not the men. So the woman, the fault that had been found, that the Torah found with the men of cruelty, did not apply to the woman. This was because when the Jewish people came out of Mitzrayim, the Moavi nation did not come and greet them with food and drink. They were parched, they were hungry, and that was considered cruel. And without basic character of kindness, of having a heart, there's no conversion possible on a foundation that lacks basic kindness. But this didn't apply to the women because the women weren't expected to, barge out of their homes to go greet the Jewish men, walking on their way. So therefore, this didn't apply to the women. Technically, that's the reason. But on a deeper level, Rus is called, she's like a pearl in the sand. Imagine mountains and mountains of sand and debris and broken shells and who knows what else. And somewhere in all of that impossible to count grains of sand is a pearl. And Rus had come all the way through the generations, through the line of Moab. Her father was the king of Moab, all the way back to 2 daughters in a cave with their father, Lot. And they thought after the destruction of Sodom that the world had been destroyed. And selflessly, they realized, or they perceived, that if they did not carry on the line of humanity, the world would be destroyed. So they put themselves in the impossible, not normal situation where they would conceive from their own father to carry on the line of humanity, because they knew that's what Hashem wanted. It was what's called an avera lishma, a sin, but done out of love for Hashem. And in fact, the name Moab means me'av, from father. And that is where Rus comes from. She comes from this line, tracing back to the daughters of Sodom, the daughters of Lot. And all these generations that this whole nation, this whole culture grew and prospered and multiplied and passed down their legacy, their Moavi legacy, to the next generation. It was also that this one spark, this one pearl would emerge. The irony is that Elimelech and Naomi and their 2 sons, who we're going to read about, when they left the land of Israel, they fled at a time of famine, at a time of difficulty. It looked like things were bleak, there was no hope. And they left the land of Israel and they went to Moab to seek a better future. I'm laughing because my parents left South Africa during the difficult years of apartheid, and they couldn't stomach what was happening politically here, and they moved to America to in search of a better future for their children. And here I am back in South Africa, raising my family for the time being here. So we never know what the next page in our book will bring, what the next chapter will bring. But Elimelech, for the wrong reasons, he left the land of Israel and he went to Moab. And Hashem was not happy what they were going to see. But what happened is that he magnetized Rus, his daughter-in-law, right? Who would the woman who his son Machlon would marry. Elimelech would die and Machlon would die. But when Naomi decides to go back to the land of Israel, she is going to bring with her daughter-in-law Rus. And Rus, she was the epitome of kindness. She personified chesed. So without knowing it, they left Israel, and Hashem punished them for this terrible act and deed that they had done. But he orchestrated it that that's how Rus was drawn like a magnet to the Jewish people and entered in to the Jewish people, and she ended up marrying the leader of the generation, the greatest man. So Hashem took Rus from Moab and the leader of the generation, and he brings them together to bring us Mashiach, to bring us David HaMelech, the father of Mashiach. So the story of Rus is so inspiring and so pivotal to the theme of a woman bringing the redemption. And we're going to see it's not just about Rus, it's actually more about Naomi. Rus was her student. She put herself at the feet of Naomi. She appreciated Naomi's virtues. Naomi is really the heroine of the story. And those of you that I know are learning with me and appreciate the deeper level, the mystical level, every time that we talk about Rus, okay, so if you have been following me, you'll know what I mean. If you're in the school, you'll definitely know what I mean in my school. And if not, don't worry about it. But every time you see the word Rus, you know that that's referring to Hashem's feminine expression, also known as the Shechina, also known as his Midah of Malchus. And every time you see Naomi, that is the source where Rus gets her energy. Who taught Rus? Who raised her? Who brought her into the Jewish people? It was Naomi. And Naomi is the wiser, older, more mature feminine in the story, and that refers to the midah, the attribute, the quality that we call Bina. Bina is understanding. There's 50 gates of understanding, and we read Megillas Rus on the 50th day of the Omer, Shavuos, and it's very beautiful to see these two women, how they work together to bring about the Geula, to bring about the redemption. So just, everything we're going to be touching the tip of the iceberg, because Torah is very vast and very deep, even such a short Megillah, 4 chapters. So just really giving you a little taste so that when you read it on Yontif, you are curious to go deeper. Boaz represents the man, the husband of Rus, and the whole story really revolves around the mitzvah of Yibum, the levirate marriage, when a woman is married to a man and the man passes away. That man's neshama, they didn't have children. When the woman marries his closest relative, the whole story revolves around these halachas of Yibum. When the woman marries the man's closest relative and she bears a son, the mystical sources tell us that it's actually a Gilgul, a reincarnation of the deceased himself. So not only is he gifted with a continuation, with progeny, with a son from his closest relative who's standing in for him after his death with his wife, but mystics say that it's actually his soul. It's actually a reincarnation of his soul. So Boaz was filling in for Machlon, Ruth's late husband, who left the world. It looked like there was no trace of him ever again. He looked like he was gone forever. But the name Machlon, it means destruction. Macha means to erase and obliterate, which is what happened to him because of his sin. But also has the lamed in there because Machlon, he got mechila. Hashem was mochal, so to speak, and he allowed him to come back into the Jewish people through the son of Rus and Boaz. So much happening here in Megillas Rus. So Boaz represents the masculine, the husband of Rus, also called in Hasidic works Seir Anpin, also called the 6 midos from Chesed to Yesod, and that's Boaz. Then who was Elimelech? This is very interesting. If Naomi is Bina, and the mother and her son was Machlon, but then he came through again with Boaz, who married her daughter-in-law Rus. So Boaz represents the righteous expression, manifestation of the man, of masculinity. And Rus is the feminine, the daughter-in-law, and the princess. Rus is the princess of the story. Then who was Elimelech? So I'm going to let you think about that a little bit. Let's just trace this theme. The keys to redemption as they appear in Megillas Rus. So where do we see this theme? So we just spoke in depth about the process of redemption, going through such difficulty, but with so much faith, coming through to bring the seed of David HaMelech and Mashiach to the world. But we see it hinted in many, many places. First of all, in the institution of a Yibum, in the levirate marriage, the one who marries, the closest relative who is found and who agrees to marry the widow, is called the Goel. It's called the Redeemer. He literally redeems the woman. And he could redeem the field, the property as well, which is what takes place in the book of Ruth. So he's called the Goel. So there's a pretty big hint. Next, we were speaking about David HaMelech, who comes from Rus. And there is a pasuk that says, Matzasi es David Avdi. I found David, my servant. And the Medrash says, Heichan matzastiv. Where did I find him? Where did Hashem find David? In the palace, in the book of Rus. Where did Hashem find David HaMelech? With Adam HaRishon. Where did he find him? And the Medrash answers, I found him in Sidon, in the cave, with the daughters of Lot. That was his origin, because that was where the spark that blossomed into Rus was germinated. So there's so much going on, specifically with the line of Mashiach, where things look so dubious and so incredulous and so unsavory and untasteful on the surface. What? The daughters of Lot with their father in the cave? And you follow the whole theme of the story of Mashiach right down the line. What? Tamar had to seduce Yehuda at the crossroads dressing up as a prostitute? What? David had to, send away Bathsheba's husband Uriah to the front line so that he would get killed so that he could marry her, right? All of these very, very strange accounts revolving around the sanctity of Jewish marriage, of the male and female. Really, really interesting. And here too in the book of Rus, what? Naomi tells Rus to sneak into where Boaz was sleeping in the middle of the night to say, redeem me, marry me. Such a modest person Rus was. We know how she bent down in the field and she didn't reveal herself, and how tsanua she was, and how tsanua Tamar was, that she covered her face, nobody even knew where she was. So this whole paradox of modesty and bravery and things not looking good on the surface, but holding the most potent holiness inside. So really a lot to just feel into and get curious about what's going on. So the story of redemption begins in Sodom, in the most unlikely of places. The way that it works is when there's a spark, and the spark gets snuffed out for a while, it gets covered over. It looks like it's gone. This is the whole story of the moon, the whole story of the house of David, of the line of Malchus. there's a king, and then there is no king, and then we're in Israel, the Beis HaMikdash is there, and then the Beis HaMikdash is destroyed, and we're in exile. It's like a tree. It's blossoming, and it's producing luscious fruits, and then the next season, all its leaves have fallen off, and it's just frosted over, and looks completely dead until the spring. And it's so this whole like waxing and waning, this whole movement having to do with Malchus, with the house of David, and with the concealing and reappearance of sparks. But the way that it works is that when a spark is conceived, and a spark germinates, and then it gets covered over, the next time it appears, it is even brighter and stronger than before. Such an incredible principle that whenever we get heavy, we get covered over with despair, with loss, with fear, things feel bleak. Just like the story of Ruth, it was so dark at the beginning. It was so bleak, and when the spark reemerges, it's the seed of David HaMelech, and it's the seed of Mashiach. So not to take things at face value, not to relate to things as they appear, to keep on having faith. And we're going to get to that in a second, because that's the first key of redemption. The pasuk in Tehillim says, "Zichru chasto v'emunaso lebeis Yisrael," that Hashem will remember his kindness and his faithfulness to the house of Israel. Chazal, our sages, say, from here we learn that Hashem will remember and renew and instate his promise of redemption to the house of Israel. To who? Who's the base? Who's the bias? The house of Israel is the woman. Right? This is one of the sources, I don't think we've ever quoted it before here, that Hashem will remember his promise to the house of Israel, to the woman. We're going to see later on, at the end of the book of Ruth, Boaz calls her an Eshes Chayil. Everybody knows you're an Eshes Chayil, he says to Ruth. Why is the Eshes Chayil, the woman of valor, called? And he says, Ki Eshes Chayil At, you are a woman of valor. At is Aleph through Taf, and the poem of Eshes Chayil goes through the letters of the Aleph base from Aleph to Taf. And our sages say that a man who is married to a woman of valor like Ruth, they had a short marriage. It was 1 day long, 1 night long. That was their marriage. And the Gemara says that a man who's married to an Eshes Chayil, it's as if he kept the entire Torah from Aleph to Taf, from beginning to end, because the woman represents the Torah. So this all comes out of Megillas Rus, how Hashem is weaving all of the strands of virtue from Rus, from Naomi, from Boaz, like a braid. Rus, Naomi, Boaz, Rus, Naomi, Boaz, to create this beautiful, beautiful fabric and tapestry. And even though each one had free will, Elimelech unfortunately misutilized his free will. But the seed of kingship hinted to in his name, Elimelech, to me comes royalty, will come royalty. It was a seed that even when he died, and that seed rotted in the ground and started decomposing, and it looked like all was lost, somehow Naomi, his wife, his widow, who had been bereft of everything, she had nothing. She had no shoes. She walked back from Moab to Beis Lechem with no shoes. She had no income. They were going to sustain themselves with the sheaves, the leftover fallen sheaves of wheat that the farmers had to let lie on their fields. That was the only way that they were going to live. She had nothing. Maybe a shack that they found to sleep in. So Naomi, somehow within her, she was able to find the strength. She had the humility. She had the courage, woman power, woman potential, to come back to Eretz Yisrael. And how she did what she did to get Boaz and Ruth together to reflower and reflourish her family line and what she did for the entire Jewish people. Ruth said to Boaz in chapter 2, I'm not even worthy to be considered one of your maidservants, she said to him. And he said to her, you're right, you're not. one of the maidservants. Don't read it amahot, maidservants. Read it imahot. Rus, you are one of the imahos. So to conclude our discussion on the theme, tracing the theme of redemption in the book of Rus, the men in the story were the ones who despaired. Elimelech fled. He lost hope in the Jewish people. He lost hope in Hashem. Machlon and Kilion followed in their father's footsteps. And Naomi was the one with this incredible strength to return. And Rus, incredible strength, the power of Jewish femininity. And even Boaz, he had to be sort of tricked into this whole thing. And that's really what's going on, and really, really fascinating. That Naomi took the decision that we had to do this in a different sort of way. We had to shock Boaz into doing this mitzvah. And that's exactly why they took such precarious steps, such a risky game they played. It could have been devastating. It should have gone wrong. Al pi derech hateva, according to natural means, it could not have succeeded. Just like Tamar, what she did, according to natural means, it would not have succeeded. What Naomi and Ruth did, it should not have succeeded. We'll learn about why. But it was complete and total faith in doing what they had to do and leaving the rest in Hashem's hands. So with that introduction, long introduction, I would like to look at what are the 3 keys of redemption. What are the 3 themes? There's many, many, many more wonderful topics and virtues that you can trace. But the ones that I chose, that stood out for me, especially from the sefer Nachalat Yosef, the first one is radical trust and faith. The second key is the thread of kindness. And the third key to redemption is mesirut nefesh, total commitment. So let's see how these play out, just brief, and then you're gonna be able to pull this all together for yourself in the Megillah. Where do we see faith and radical trust? So I'm taking for granted that you know the basic storyline. Basically, what Naomi said to Ruth is that you need to go there and you need to ask him directly, will you redeem me? Because had they gone the straight road, just direct during waking hours, there was a closer relative that really had priority to do the mitzvah of Yibum and marry and redeem Ruth. But Naomi didn't want the other one. He's known as Ploni Almoni, so-and-so, right? The one who was so concerned about his reputation, now he doesn't even have a name. And he was of lesser caliber. He was mediocre. And he was the closer one and should have redeemed her. And Naomi wanted Boaz, wanted someone of his stature to do the mitzvah. So when Ruth appeared there in the middle of the night, in the granary where he was keeping his grain, he's an old man. I think he was 80 and Ruth was 40, if I'm not mistaken. And his wife had passed away. And he is the leader of the entire nation. And then there's this woman that sneaks into where he's sleeping. That was something that could have so startled him and so shocked him that he could have killed her. That's what the sources say. He could have cursed her, and he could have actually killed her, because obviously a woman stealing into his private space in the middle of the night was catastrophic for his reputation and for his spiritual, moral, he couldn't have that. So what they did was risky in the extreme. And instead, Naomi did her bit, and Ruth did her bit. And the secret to this is that each one, as soon as they did their part, they let go. So Naomi did her part in getting Ruth to go down. She passed the baton to Ruth. Naomi let go. That's faith. You do your part 100%, and then you watch it unfold. And Ruth did her part, and she passed the baton to Boaz. She couldn't control the outcome. All she can do was pray and have faith. And then she let go. And that's where Boaz picked it up, and he did his part, which entailed waiting till the next day and making sure that the Redeemer was given an option so that it was all legitimate and above ground, and then finding the beis din and the witnesses and doing the whole procedure of Yibum properly. And he did his part, and then he let go. And then Hashem wove it all together. So, incredible patience, not controlling, radical trust to do what you can, to be there, and to let go. So there's an amazing quote for this. Just to hear it in the Hebrew, Rabbi Eliezer Amar, Boaz asa es shalo, Rus asasa es shala, Benami asasa es shala, Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu av ami asa es shali. Boaz did his part, Rus did hers, Naomi did hers, and Hashem says, now I will do mine, and I will bring the seed of Mashiach to the fore. And it's such a powerful lesson because radical trust does not mean I let go from the beginning. No, you can't. You have to put in your all. You have to be fully invested, fully exerted in what you believe. And when Hashem sees that, He does it. Right? You feel the paradox. Incredible. And we know that Boaz died that night, right? So had waited, if he didn't have this reasons, if Ruth wouldn't have gone when she did, if Naomi wouldn't have told her when she did, seizing the moment, feeling into the moment. Incredible. Another point about faith is that the Medrash says that Ruth, Iker Motrin Lo Hayala, she naturally could not have had children. She was one of those wombless women. She couldn't have had children naturally. Did you know that? I know you knew that about Sarah, but Ruth didn't have a womb. And the fact that she conceived is beyond miraculous. The whole story is beyond miraculous. So just to give us chizuk, we do our part. It's a difficult time in Israel, difficult circumstances that many people have all around. It's not easy times. And just to know that Hashem is not forsaking us, will not forsake us. We need to stand by our potential, and we need to have that radical faith and radical trust and do our part 100%. The second key is kindness, and this is what Chazal say, our sages say. Megillah zu ein batoma v'lo tara, lo iser v'lo heter, v'lama nichtava. This scroll, it doesn't have intricate laws of purity and impure, and what's forbidden and what's permitted. On all nights, receiving the Torah, shouldn't we get something more Torahic, right? More compact with halacha, with Torah content. Why was it written? To teach us how great Kama Sachar Tov L'Gomlei Chasadim, how great is the reward for those who do kindness. And this is hands down the entire theme of the entire scroll of the book of Ruth. It's in the harshest conditions, in the hardest times. We see how kind Naomi was to Ruth, but more profoundly how kind Ruth was to Naomi. And she didn't want to leave her, and she stood by her side, and she went to beg for alms, to collect charity, to sustain her so that the woman who was previously an aristocratic, wealthy woman wouldn't need to be put in that position, and how eventually she does the most selfless act of going to marry the relative that Naomi had chosen for her to do the levirate marriage, even though it was a man twice her age, and he died the next day. So to go and marry for that reason and to put herself in the position she put herself in. And then we trace this theme all the way through how Boaz treated Ruth, and just this beautiful exchange of kindness one to the other, and contrasting that to Elimelech and Machlon and Kilion, who were self-centered. The Rashi says, why did he leave Beis Lechem? The name of the city, the house of bread. Ironically, there was a famine, there was no bread. He left because of the famine, and he didn't want to have to help the poor people. He didn't think there was hope for them. He thought Hashem had abandoned them, and he didn't think he mattered. So he left. So he had that saros ayin, that sort of myopic view, me and my resources and my agenda and my comfort and my survival. And can you fault him? That's like default human nature. And the same thing happened with Machlon and Kilion. They married a woman not for noble reasons, but because it suited them. And contrasting that with the heroines of the story. Why is chesed, the theme of kindness, so critical? So just like we can't bring Mashiach without faith, and our faith may be tested more than we can, God forbid, possibly imagine, and to still know that He will not forsake us, that He has a bigger plan, that He's bringing forth something amazing. And just like the book of Ruth, there was tremendous struggling and tremendous suffering and tremendous loss, and it looked so dark. And Hashem was busy. Hashem was busy. I want to read you, in the story, there's a big connection between Tamar and Rus, as we've already suggested. Chazal say 2 women, that from them was built the seed of Yehuda, and who came out of them David HaMelech, Shlomo HaMelech, the Melech HaMashiach, Tamar v'Rus. Shtehem asu b'kashrus k'dei lasos tova im amesim. They both did what they did to perform an act of kindness to the deceased through the levirate marriage, through Yibum. In the period of history where Tamar did her act, the Medrash says, in introduction to that whole section, Shvatim hayu oskim v'mechirasa shel Yosef. The tribes were busy selling Yosef. Yosef was busy grieving, basaklo v'taniso, mourning. Reuven was busy, basaklo v'taniso, mourning and grieving. Yaakov was busy mourning and grieving. Yehuda haya asok likachlo isha. Yehuda was busy taking for himself a wife. Right at that section, right after the sale of Yosef, of his brothers selling him, and the whole terrible calamity that was going on there with the family, the royal family of Yaakov and his sons. Yehuda was busy taking a wife. And then it continues, V'akadosh Baruch Hu haya osek borei oro shel melech HaMashiach. Hashem was busy creating the light of Mashiach. Because through Tamar and Yehuda, because Yehuda's wife was going to die, and then the whole story of the Yibum took place there, and Tamar ended up seeding from him the line of Mashiach. So we see this theme when things look so dark, so bleak. Hashem is busy spinning something greater than we can even imagine. It takes tremendous faith to believe in this. So that was the first one about faith. Now, how does kindness fit into bringing about Mashiach? Why is it a key to redemption? Faith, we can understand now. But why is being prepared to go the extra mile for another person, to think about them, to come out of ourself, to contain our own needs, to contain our ego needs, our physical needs, and to put somebody else first? This is such a holy act. This is the essence of chesed, and this is the essence of Mashiach consciousness. And that's exactly what Hashem was trying to do. Hashem had given them the famine, and He had given them the suffering because He was bringing them back close to Him again. He was bringing them back to Eretz Yisrael, back to Torah. All of the callous, superficial layers of a person's soul is burned off when they suffer. So Hashem was busy burning off whatever wasn't serving them and helping them, and they came back refined and ready to receive holiness. And the biggest thing, the biggest shift that happened for them is that they fell into the lap of kindness, of chesed. It's that inner engine that brings tremendous joy to the ones who are giving and to the ones who are receiving what it is they need to receive. But there's something magical about chesed. It comes from deep, deep within the neshama. It defies the natural tendencies that we have of warring for our own skin, looking after our own back. And and this is a really big, big shift. And we see this, that who is the hero of the story? Is it Rus? Well, I said that it was actually Naomi, but without Rus, Naomi couldn't have done what she did, and without Boaz, it all would have flopped. So what we see is that other people are there to help us bring Mashiach. It's as simple as that. There's no one person who's going to bring Mashiach. There's no one hero. But being worthy, to be a generation worthy of Mashiach, is to be a generation that sees each other as partners in the creation of a new world. We don't see each other as threats, but as allies, and as deeply bonded with them. Appreciating others for how much they enrich us. And it's just such a profound message. This is the message of Chesed, because it's focusing on what can I bring to others. And it's that bond of love. It totally goes above the ego concerns. And obviously the book, the Torah, has to be given on a foundation. Torah's Chesed al-Shona, on a foundation of Chesed. And Mashiach needs to come in a world of Chesed. So, very, very beautiful points about the 3 keys of redemption. The first one is faith. The second one is kindness. And what's the third key, as highlighted in the Nachalat Yosef, organized according to this particular way? That is total commitment. Being all in. Being crazy about it. You know, in today's world, you could be, balanced, and you could be, you want to make sure that you're related to by people of all walks. And you can end up diluting yourself, and you can end up not being all in. Doing your responsibilities, but not deep diving, not immersing yourself, not fully giving your heart. And this is such an important point, because it's not about doing your responsibilities. It's not about keeping the Torah according to halacha. It's about listening for the essence of the Torah and bonding with the Torah with your whole being, with your mind and with your heart, and not leaving any parts behind, and giving it your all. So it's sort of like the opposite of emunah, right? Letting Hashem bring it all about and watch it unfold. This third one is really about giving it everything you've got. So, mesirut nefesh, giving over your heart and soul, being 1,000% committed. What does this have to do with Megillas Rus? So I'd like to read for you, here we go, from the beginning of the sefer Nachalat Yosef. He quotes from the Yalkut of Rus. Ma inyan Rus etzel atzeres. Why? We started with this, we're ending with this. Why do we read Rus on Shavuos? Shenikres batzeres bisman matam Torah, the day of the giving of the Torah. L'lamdecha shalom nitna Torah ela al yedei yisurin va'oni. To teach you that the Torah is only given through suffering and poverty and deprivation. So this might sound interesting to you. Is it true that you have to suffer and you have to be deprived in order to receive the Torah? So we know that the Mishnah in Avos says that you should be prepared to live a life of suffering and deprivation. If that's what it comes down to, you should be prepared for it. Doesn't mean you could only receive the Torah for poverty. So what does this actually mean? So the Zohar and the Medrash make a very interesting comparison to the book of Iyov. So whereas Rus speaks about famine and death and loss and losing wealth and all the stark realities that they had to respond to, the book of Iyov is known as the book of suffering, but the book of Rus is known as the book of redemption. So what's the difference? Iyov also lost his wealth and lost his family and lost his health and suffered so much. So why is Rus different than Iyov? So he brings a very beautiful analogy to imagine a scene of rain clouds forming, and the sun was shining, and it was a beautiful day, and green grass and birds chirping, and suddenly these gray, ominous clouds come and cover the sun, and it's all dark, and it's cold, and it's gloomy and depressing. Then, after a few hours, the clouds part, and they move on, and the sun shines again. That's Eov. He had it all, he lost it all, and then Hashem restored him to his former state of well-being. And the suffering was unexplained and seemed unfair and unjust. And that's the book of Eov, how he deals with that and the lessons that book brings. Whereas Megillas Rus, picture the same scene, beaming sun, green grass, chirping birds. Well, actually, parched grass. And then the clouds come. They gather, they form, they're heavy. They break through with nourishing rains, which wake up the crops. And when the clouds pass, the sun shines once again, and the earth is growing and producing. That's the book of Rus. So the suffering of Eov was not productive, it was not generative, it seemed meaningless. Whereas the suffering in the book of Rus is what made them so out of the metal that they were made of. It's what brought about it. It tilled the soil for the seed of David to be planted. So, with retrospect, it's a book of tremendous love and commitment and devotion and passion, and Hashem was there all along. That's the essence of it. So you have to see that level of commitment and mesirut nefesh and endurance that these women, Rus and Naomi, had to deal with humiliation, with deprivation, with poverty, with not knowing where their next meal was going to come from. However, the Nachalat Yosef says that this principle about suffering, and you may be thinking of suffering of somebody you know or suffering you're currently going through in your own life, that Hashem gives it with love, that it is bringing about a seed. It's bringing about your greatness, our greatness, bringing us to teshuvah, bringing us close to Him, bringing out latent spiritual potential. Could be a million reasons why we suffer. But the Nachalat Yosef says that if it rains, if those clouds of heavy suffering pass over the sun, blocking it, and it rains, the ground is only going to produce crops and vegetation and flowers and grasses if the seeds were there. So a person that doesn't have intrinsic seed of goodness within them, when the suffering comes, they just turn bitter and they just curse, God forbid, Hashem. But a great person, when they suffer, even if they don't understand it, and who does? No one understands their suffering at the time that they're going through it. If they are truly a good person, then no matter what, the suffering will bring out the best in them. So, tribute to Ruth and Naomi, the kinds of people that they were able to blossom and respond in the way they did. And of course, as soon as they responded, it was all flipped, and they became the mothers of royalty and the most esteemed. They lost everything, and then suddenly they got it all back because of their inner movement. So I'm just going to conclude today's introductory share about redemption, tracing the themes of redemption, the power of Naomi and Ruth, of women in the Megillah, why we read it on Shavuos, the three keys that we spoke about. Just to wrap it up with Oved, the son that was born to Ruth and Boaz, they called him Oved, which means servant of Hashem, an Eved Hashem. You would think, is that all? Is that all? Like after all that, his name is just Oved? He just is a servant of Hashem? You would expect, David was the Na'im Zemiros Yisrael, the Melech, the fourth patriarch, Rus, they say her name comes from the word Rava, which means she satisfied Hashem because her great-grandson created the Psalms, the Tehillim, which bring Hashem tremendous nachas ruach, tremendous satisfaction. So their child, the name Oved, to me, it always felt like a little bit of a downer, like a bummer, like it was going like the peak of their whole, where the song was crescendoing, and they got married, and she didn't have a womb, and he died the next night, and the next day, and they had a child, and they named him. You expect like something really, really, I don't know. The name Oved, like a servant, like aren't we all servants of Hashem? Aren't we all here to serve Hashem? It just seems so regular. And Rabbi Lopiansky wrote in his beautiful translation that if you can be called a servant of Hashem, that is the highest praise. Moshe Rabbeinu, he was the one who was called an Eved Hashem, an Eved Ne'aman, a servant of Hashem, because if you're just looking to do your obligations and, move on, and, you don't want anyone to have a taina on you, you don't want Hashem to have a taina on you, you just do what you have to do, you keep halacha, you do everything right, that's not called an Eved Hashem. Eved Hashem is somebody who is actively pursuing and exerting himself how to serve Hashem. And this comes from the Gemara in Chagiga, which says, you can't compare somebody who learns a section of Torah 100 times to 101 times. 100 times, if you review something 100 times, it's good, but it's not called an Oved. It's not called somebody who is 100% all in. You have to review that section 101 times. It's like going beyond what you thought was max, going beyond. And he concludes that Orpah, she did what was expected of her. She did the right thing. She accompanied Naomi the large part of the way. She also didn't have shoes. She also was kind and respectful. She also gave her a kiss when she said, my daughters, you must go back to where you came from, to Moab. What can I give you in Israel? I have nothing to give you. She didn't do anything wrong. But she wasn't an Oved. She wasn't there 100% like Ruth was. And what happens is that when there's a tiny little gap between doing your duty and being all in, being an Eved Hashem, an Oved, the gap widens so fast. And we see what happened with Orpah is that on that very night that she left Naomi and Ruth, she fell to the depths of depravity, whereas Ruth went on to don the crown of royalty. And it was just the difference between 100 and 101. It was just whether you do what you think you're supposed to do, or you're an Eved Hashem, you're completely wholly devoted. So that is an introduction to the book of Ruth, the 3 keys to redemption, the themes. I wish that we were able to go through the whole sefer and see them all playing out. There's nothing more beautiful than looking at it inside. I'm not sure that time is going to allow us, but just to wish you a good Shabbos and a good Chodesh and a good Yantif, and may we merit to sow seeds of redemption, to rise into our highest feminine potential, to rise above our egos, to truly think of one another, to realize our connection with one another, to step into radical faith and patience as we wait for things to unfold after we have put in our 100%, our max. And the ultimate praise is really that we should all be deemed worthy, Ovdim, servants of Hashem, as we receive the Torah anew, the Shavuos. So, wishing you all a beautiful Yantif. And just to let you know, the previous class, Mystery of Modern Marriage, we're in the middle of that series, so stay tuned for part 2, which you need to sign up to get the information at info@thenexus.org. You can email us or sign up on the website, thenexus.org. And stay tuned, Emirat Hashem, for the Sarah course, taking enrollments now. You can go to my website, The Nexus, go to the school, the Rise series, select Sarah. So The Nexus /Rise series /Sarah, and take a look over there. And I look forward to seeing you there.